Thank you for being here. We know on day 3 everybody's a little bit mentally, emotionally, physically tired. So thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. We're hoping today's session is a little bit more conversational and just kind of the opportunity to informally share our journey and where we're at. So at any point, if you have questions, don't feel like you have to wait to the end. Let's just talk about them as we go, because we want this to really just be a learning experience for us and for you. So a little bit about ourselves. My name is Megan Hall. I'm the Director of Curriculum and Innovation at Keystone Central School District.
Hi, I'm Lisa Lucas. I am an interventionist in Keystone Central, and I am the department leader for ELA.
And social studies. She doesn't like to claim it, but she is.
I'm Leslie Skirtich, and I'm an instructional coach at one of our buildings.
So just a little bit about our district. We are located right in the center of the state, hence why we are Keystone Central. We are the largest geographic district in Pennsylvania. We span over 970 geographic miles, which poses a lot of difficulties. When you're kind of looking at us on the map, we cover just a huge span of space. We actually have 2 sort of tiers. We have a southern tier that has 7 buildings, and then we have a northern tier that has its own campus with 2 buildings. So super unique district in that sense. We have about 3,700 students in those 9 buildings, 5 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, 2 high schools, and our own career and technical center. We have a 59% economically disadvantaged rate. We have buildings that span from 78% economically disadvantaged, which is the building that those 2 work in, and then we have buildings who are about 20%. So we, within those 9 buildings, have a huge span of our poverty rate, and that poses its own challenge. So we've had to really purposely align our supports to the student need. We have about 20% special education rate, and we're about 90% white, so we are not very diverse. But we do recently have a really large influx of ELs. We are seeing massive amounts of EL students enrolling, or we're trying to find them to get them enrolled. So we're just trying to, at this point, serve the need of that population when it's relatively new to our area. So just a little bit about us, demographics and what we're working with and against. I guess I should have told you to do that. You already met us. So just a little bit about where our journey began. We have been on the process of creating, implementing, refining our MTSS process since about 2019, 2020. I began in the district 3 days into the shutdown in March of 2020. So I only knew people in 2D for a really long time. So that was a challenge. But so kind of where we began, there was probably one of the stories I'll remember forever, starting at Keystone Central, is we joined a Zoom with some elementary teachers, and we said, okay, it's March of 2020. We have what we know is at least a few weeks of remote instruction. What are you currently teaching that we could work to divide and conquer to create some digital resources? And it looked like a bunch of deer in headlights because they were all teaching totally different things. There was 0 consistency. They were like, what do you mean the same thing? Like, everybody was everywhere. There was no curriculum consistency at all. So in my role as director of curriculum, there had been no curriculum director for 8 years prior to. Curriculum binders lived in the office that I inherited, black binders with printed curriculum maps. So I asked a teacher, do you know where the curriculum is? No. Nobody even knew it was there. So nobody was following it. There was no expectation, I don't think, to follow it. So we were kind of starting from scratch, which was both a challenge and a great opportunity. We knew before I got there, these ladies had started doing some legwork on realizing that our core, especially in literacy, lacked foundational skill, direct explicit instruction, didn't have it. We have benchmark literacy as our core K-6 program, and while it is good on the vocab and comp piece, it definitely had some serious holes in foundational skills. The resources weren't really aligned. Walked into many closets and saw just a lot of lakeshore stuff, right? Phonics bingo, okay, but right, not really aligned with what we know are research-based evidence practices. There was no real connection between what was happening in the title services and what was happening in core. So again, I think our titles teachers were doing the best they could with what they had, but there wasn't a whole lot of consistency in terms of what resources were being used. Was there any intentionality behind those resources? And were those resources helping kids access core? And often the case, the answer was yes sometimes, but not often. We used assessments. Leslie can talk about this a little bit. They were, in 2018? Use the mic. Yeah, so they were part of the Patent
2016-17.
2016-2017 part of the Patent grant, and started dabbling in the use of universal screeners to collect student data. So that had been in place for a few years.
Yeah, but only at one building. So I came from one of the buildings in the district, and at that time I was a Title I teacher, and we started to realize, well, we need to make some changes, which I had been a little bit frustrated as a title teacher, thinking we are not pulling our students based on the right thing. Could we get more, a better way to determine who we pull to provide services to? And so we were fortunate to take part in the Patent Consortium and learned a lot about it. Started the shift to science of reading, but like I said, it was just in a silo, and it was we were not as a district taking that whole. Taking that process and developing it district-wide.
Yeah, so we had the assessments. We used AIMSweb at the time for our universal screening for K2, but there wasn't a whole lot of consistent use of that in decision making. Kind of give it. Classroom teachers certainly didn't understand the data. So we knew that there was, it was kind of like, the interventionist or the coach might help you look at that, but it's not necessarily a deep understanding at the classroom teacher level.
We had made a few tweaks from 2016. From that experience, district-wide, we did switch to AIMSweb at the time because we had done DIBELS, but we had done it with lack of training, so we weren't doing it correctly. And we were like, oh, that's why it's not making sense. And as Megan said, it was more, especially from the classroom teacher's standpoint, it was more a check it off the box and not use it. We had a lot of district assessments that we were using. And I remember when Dr. Collins and Karen Brady came and they saw all these and they're like, what are these? And we're like, well, this is what we do every month. And they're like, no. And so we did start to make some changes.
Assessing to death.
Yeah, that's what we were doing. We were just assessing our kids to death and not really making instructional decisions. And you were a classroom teacher.
And that's where I was. I was sitting in a first grade. I taught first grade for 17 years, and we did DIBELS for a little bit. Then we did switch to AIMS, and we were giving AIMSweb, and then we were progress monitoring. I had 25 kids, and I probably was progress monitoring 22 of those kids on 2 assessments. And as a teacher, I was just doing it, and I wasn't using that data to help me in any way move forward. So it was interesting.
Yeah. So I'm sure that you're probably thinking, wonder what their results were. I think you probably know. So our results were not good. Our student achievement was not good. But it was kind of just a recipe for disaster, right? I mean, a lot of good things in silos and incredible people who wanted to do the right thing. It just didn't all work together cohesively to lead to that student achievement. So we kind of already talked, there was there were no tiers, but if there were tiers, they wouldn't have been aligned. Can you click next for me? So just to... just a little bit about our journey. When we started working with our local IU to kind of start really formalizing the MTSS process, you know, our IU consultant was like, it's a 3 to 5 year process. And I said, well, I'm impatient. So let's try to get as much in place as we can. So really on our kind of timeline here, we really started 1920, but we're going to kind of take you through what we added, what we layered on each year to kind of get us to where we are now, and how that looks.
So as Megan said, she came on board in March of 2020, and in that year, 1920, actually, I want to back up just a little bit because we had a change in administration at the end of the prior school year, and we had a new superintendent that came aboard. And one of the first things that she did that I was really excited about is we added instructional coaches and district program leaders, and it's definitely something that we needed. And like going through the things that we had gone through with Pat and like myself, I was like, yes, this is perfect. We're moving in the right direction. As Megan mentioned earlier, we knew that we needed a foundation, something to support our foundational skills at the K-2 level because we didn't have it. It wasn't strong. So we started a search, you know, prior to the March shutdown. We had been in the process. Lisa and I were involved in that, our other coaches and DPLs, and we had a team of teachers together that we were looking at different things and trying to decide what would best support our students. And then March of 2020 came along, and as Megan said, she started 3 days in. So that was, you know, the shutdown, it was actually good for us in a way because we didn't just spend the time, I mean, we did spend a lot of time trying to determine how to support the kids while we're shut down and, you know, what type of lessons can we do remotely and that kind of thing. But we also, at that same time, as she said, we worked very closely with our local IU, and we had some consultants from the IU begin science of reading training for all of our K-2 staff. I think we had everyone, itinerants and everything.
Oh yeah, like PE teachers, they were
support
thrilled.
staff.
It was great.
Yeah, so we had a lot of Zoom sessions where they were getting an introduction to what the shift looks like. And I mean, that was a fabulous opportunity for us because we would not have had that opportunity had we not been working from home, working remotely. And so we had that time. We also made a decision and we chose ECRI. If you've heard of ECRI, we chose to use that as our overlay. And another thing that we did in that spring is we restructured the interventionist positions. So it was no longer, my title used to be, you know, Title I reading. And we actually changed it to interventionist. And I think it's math and reading. We don't really have a lot of them yet working in math, but that's our goal. It also became an interview position. Prior to that, it was, we had bidding in our district and anyone could bid into it. And even years prior to that, it was capped at a certain salary level. So we tended, in earlier years, we tended to have less experienced people in there when we actually know that interventionists need to be our most skilled teachers, providers. And so we restructured that position. We did interviews while we were remote, and really that team looked different. And Megan, I don't know if you want to add anything to this because that was the beginning of where we're going to take you from the beginning of our journey, because that's really where we started.
Yeah, and I think something we, you know, lay as our foundation is the importance of professional learning. We knew that we couldn't make this shift without teachers understanding the why, because, you know, what happens when we all go back and shut our classroom doors is that if they don't understand the why, it's just going to go back to the old practices. So we really took that opportunity during the shutdown when we had time, and we wouldn't have had that time otherwise. So it was definitely a key moment of where things started to kind of pivot for us. And again, we did everybody, and those PE teachers were rolling their eyes at the time. However, you know, we try to just really, like, literacy is everywhere. It is truly cross-curricular, and we mean it. There are opportunities for you to engage students in every subject areas. Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay.
So this is the next school year. When we came back, we were in and out and in and out. Hybrid, some here, some there, some at home, and some on the computer. Remember that? Yeah.
Yeah.
That was here.
Yeah, this was definitely a tough year, but we really were making some great improvements. We improved our core. We did add ECRI. The teachers were all trained in ECRI, and so we picked that up. We added phonemic awareness, so we were able to layer this on top of our benchmark literacy, which was an amazing help. So all the teachers in K through 2, the interventionists, and we have intervention assistants, they were all trained in ECRI. We had a group of coaches and our department leaders that year were trained in letters. We also started to filter out some stuff to parents that we were making this shift in science of reading. So we sent out a letter to everybody in our district about our science of reading shift and what ECRI was, and if the kids were coming home talking about what they were doing, the parents would be able to understand that. So we did that.
And some of that included too, please don't cue your kids. Here's the things we're trying to get away from, because parents need to know that when the kids are at home. Here's the language we're using. And what opportunities do we have to train parents on that, so that there's not a disconnect between what's happening at school and at home.
Can I also add? Just want to add, we did all this, and like Megan said, we were in and out of school. In the summer when we had the ECRI training, it was not ideal. It was remotely done. And some of our teachers, we didn't do all this, and it wasn't a bed of roses for everyone. We did have some teachers like, why are we even doing this? We're in the middle of a pandemic. And we were like, we can't wait. Our kids need this now. So it's going to be better to do it and see what we can do during this time. And we'll just keep getting better at it. But we just didn't want to wait. We had to do something.
And I think when we look back on it, it was a good opportunity for teachers to learn. They were doing ECRI remotely, but they were, we made slides, and we were able to project that stuff remotely. And while it was rough and they were learning the language, I still think it was a really good opportunity for them to kind of just learn it that year and get through it. And then when we got into the classroom, they had that language down, and they were better. So it was, looking back on it, it wasn't too terrible. And then we started to establish advanced tiers. We added a school-wide win time. So, and we're going to talk about win later on in the presentation, but it's what I need. So we take all of our assessment data, and then we filter those kids all out through out the classroom teachers, the intervention, the assistants, and give those kids the exact instruction that they need, whether it is high or whether it is low. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We started an MTSS district level team, and we did a lot of professional learning at that MTSS level. Okay. Are there any questions or anything so far about?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what did you take out to fit win in?
Ooh, good question. First, I have to repeat your question because that man told me I have to. So what did we take out to put win in? Good question. A dedicated writing block. So there was, on the schedule, there was 90 minutes ELA, 90 minutes math, 45 minutes writing. So we took the writing block and said ELA also means writing, and we can write across all content areas. So if something needs to give, we feel like we can integrate this throughout the day. Definitely not a popular decision. People still ask to bring it back, but we only have so much time in a day, just like any other elementary division, right? You only have so much time. And what we wanted to be cognizant of is not hacking away at science and social studies too much, because science and social studies allows students to develop a really great background knowledge that they'll be able to tie information to later. So we didn't want to hack away too much at that. So we started with a 45-minute win across the board this year. in 2020. We are now in most buildings down to a 30-minute win because we just kind of found that based on the interventions that we have in place, and we'll share what we have in place, most of them could be done within 30 minutes and still be faithful to the intervention. So we've kind of tweaked as we've gone, and a lot of schools have taken that opportunity to pick those 15 minutes up and, you know, gift it back to writing. But our teachers they've all been Collins trained as well, so we know how to integrate writing in a very easy way across all content areas. So, great question. Okay, so then in 21-22, we did a lot. So we talked about our fundamental belief of professional learning, our fundamental commitment to it. We restructured the entire student day and teacher day to get time after students are dismissed where our teachers are still under contractual time. And we have all K-4 teachers, all special education teachers, all SLPs, all title associates, ESL teachers, all are doing letters. So language essentials, teachers of reading and spelling, which we know is the gold standard of structured literacy professional learning. But it is a huge time commitment, and it is a huge financial commitment. But we knew that fundamentally things weren't going to change if teachers didn't understand the why or the how. We could give them the what. We could give them the intervention. We could give them the core program. But, you know, as it says in what Unit 1 of letters, programs don't teach students how to read. Teachers teach students how to read. So we knew no matter what, it was a core value that we possessed that this had to happen. And it had to happen, so we were willing to sort of restructure everything that we did. So now we have a little bit less student instructional time, but we were still well within the state requirements. And now our students are dismissed at 2:40 and our teachers work until 3:10. So what we do is we have that 40 minutes, really 30 in reality till everybody can get around, where we have chunked the asynchronous components of letters and also built in some live letter sessions with our letters trainers in that 40-minute time frame. 2 days, actually really technically 3 days out of the 6-day cycle are devoted to letters. Our other two of them are for PLCs, and then we have a building day or two in there as well. So we kind of structured that after school time. We send everybody the calendar for the whole year. In August, here's your letters days, here's your building days, here's your PLC days. Because we knew the PLC also was the avenue to having teachers have really rich data discussions and think about, what do I know if they already know it? Or what do I do if they already know it? And what do I do if they don't? So we knew we had to build that in. It wasn't going to happen without really clear, intentional redesign.
Yeah, and it gives the teachers an opportunity to do it within the school day, because you know what it's like when you go home with your families and everything. So it's a really nice time of the day.
So we also took, and traditionally letters will, the 2 volumes would take you about 2 years. We spread it out to 3 years. So we're in year 3 of 3. So at the end of this year, every teacher that we have will be trained, and then our new teachers coming on board will do it a different way. But so yeah, it was a huge commitment, but we knew that we had to. That year, we also implemented the tiers that we had created for K-2, and just kind of continued to focus on improving the core because we knew we couldn't intervene our way out of core issues. So we also added things like 95% group. We added interventionist positions to our middle school because that win time is district-wide, K-12. So we're really trying to get our middle school well underway, and we'll talk about that later. So that brings us not to this year, last year. We were refining last year K2. We added sound wall instruction to our core because we knew that was a hole. So we just kind of kept finding holes, right? We're adding things, but we're still finding here. So we had all of our teachers trained on sound wall instruction. And then we also put into place like consistent data team meeting practices. We were having data team meetings, but they weren't always super focused and or consistent from building to building. With the 5 elementary buildings, everybody kind of had their unique way of doing it. So we're like, we need to have a methodical approach to this.
I just want to add part of that. When we established the MTSS, we established a handbook, and within that handbook, we had a district calendar. So the data team meetings and even like looking at data at our 6 to 8 week points, everything is built in there. So it's not a like, oh, this should be happening around this time. We have specific dates that are in there, and we update that every year. And also within that MTSS handbook, we clearly define some things, because even within the MTSS team, as we were being trained, there were some questions that came up. Well, what does this team consist? Who is in this team? Who should be at the data team meetings? Those kind of things. So we worked again with our IU consultants to help us develop that. We took some things that other school districts were doing. Looked at some examples and just really tried to be very intentional in what we were doing with all aspects of the MTSS.
So that same year, we implemented our tiers of support in the grades 3 and 4. And as all of you know, if you're dabbling in this world, like it gets progressively harder to implement MTSS as you get further in the grades. So we were really kind of trying to refine what 3-4 looks like. We had a lot of students who still had foundational skill gaps that we knew we needed to address at the 3-4 level. So added some resources there. And that brings us to this year.
And just for reference, 4 of our 5 elementary schools are K to 4. The one in the northern tier is like K to 5?
K to 6.
K6.
Because why would you be consistent? That would be weird.
Yeah. So when we're talking about like why we made these slow rollout, it's sort of how the grade levels were divided.
Yeah. And we really, we divide a lot K2, 3, 4. It's just kind of our organic division. So last year too, we started adding things to our MTSS handbook that provided some clarity. I think we had a lot of teachers doing really amazing things with all the changes that we had made. It was truly like one change after another, but we needed it. Like we couldn't look away. So we added a lot of clarity to the handbook in terms of like this is our instructional matrix for K2. And we break it out by whole group and small group, what happens during whole group. And the biggest thing that teachers said was, I don't have time. I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time. So we tried to like even allot time. Now this isn't like a, if you take more than 10 minutes for your ECRI that somebody's gonna slap your hand, but it's like a guide, right? Here's what's suggested. So we have that ECRI mini lesson, and this is the explicit instruction of the skill that is taught in ECRI that day. Because again, remember, we're adding ECRI as an overlay to a core program that doesn't have any foundational skills, so we had to kind of finagle that. Then we get into our sound wall lesson using sound wall solutions. Again, aligned with what's going to be practiced in that ECRI routine that day. And so I think when we started ECRI, it was a lot of teacher talk in between because the kids needed to be explicitly taught. So we were trying to just shape things up a little bit differently so that the teacher talk was happening here and ECRI truly is just the practice.
So to explain that a little bit more, we are overlaying this onto benchmark, and so there isn't any explicit lessons for that, for your ECRI. So like kids have to know things like the short vowel rules, they have to know things like what is a blend and some of those rules. So that's what we're doing during that ECRI pre-teach. We are teaching those things, even irregular words, heart words. That's when we're pulling those things out and talking about them. And then when we go into ECRI, we are doing ECRI quick and pacey like it's supposed to be and not talking at that time. So that's what that ECRI mini lesson is. so you can get all that kind of talking, that teaching out of the way, and then you go into ECRI as the practice. So that's a nice implementation that we put in and added on just in this year.
And of course, we have our vocab comp and writing pieces that we just wanted to make sure there was some intentionality behind those as well, even though we have been focused on foundational skills. So again, our core was pretty soft, like it's a pretty good resource for vocab and comp. It just needs to be, modified a little bit.
And again, of course, the times, like some teachers will say, oh, well, this doesn't take that long. And it is really different depending on your grade level, right? Right, kindergarten can do ECRI super fast, and second grade is a little longer. So it's a give and take, but we just put times in there to try to give everybody an idea of how long it should be.
And then the next page, I think, if you go,
Is this
is the SGI piece, right? So what do you do during small group? So we tried to lay out within advanced instruction, grade level instruction, some students who are at some risk and students who are at high risk. And we tried to lay this out to make it as easy as possible for classroom teachers to use that SGI time in a really intentional manner. So that at K2 means, practice with the decodables. But even the need and how you do that with the decodables during SGI varies based on the students. So we try to just kind of lay all that out and then also give teachers some ideas for what other students could and should be doing when you're working directly with students for decodables and other direct instruction.
And we have a small group block of 45 minutes, so it's a good chunk of time that the teachers can meet with their small groups. And
that's part of the
why
90 total. So it's about 45-45 split.
And at our school, we're very lucky. Our interventions are pushing in at that time too. So that gives kids another dose of instruction with us. So it's working out very nicely.
So adding that clarity, adding just kind of this is what all K2 students are receiving in ELA core. Just kind of helped us get some consistency. It's not perfect, nothing ever will be, but I think it's brought us pretty far. So that brings us to this year. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
You said interventionists push in during that time?
Mm-hmm.
Like resource-wise, how does that work with, like, do you stagger scheduling so that?
So yes, so each grade level does have a pretty rigid schedule so that small group instruction, for example, isn't happening in second grade and first grade at the same time. So we
Even across the grade level, how many interventionists are pushing into each classroom?
It depends on the building. The building they're at is 5 sections wide of K1 and 2, 4 sections wide of 3, 4, and we have 5 interventionists. However, because again, 78% economically disadvantaged. But in smaller buildings, we have 3 schools that are just 2 wide, and they either have 1 interventionist or 1 interventionist and an assistant. So it looks a little bit different there, but they just work with the classroom teachers to identify what room has the highest level of need, and also do we move kids during small group to another, do I take some of your 5 lows that will benefit from SGI from an interventionist, and we kind of flex students that way to make that work. It's a little trickier in the smaller buildings for sure. Yeah.
So in your experience, how do you get the district to understand the importance of the interventionist? Like our school has 670 kids and we have 2 interventionists.
Ooh.
2 specialists.
So the question was, I forgot to do it on the last one. You should have yelled at me.
And we're Title I. We're Title I.
Yeah. So the question was, how do you get the district to realize the importance of intervention positions and align those resources to student need, essentially, right? So it is a Title I building.
We're Title I. We have 600. We're the biggest school in our district, and we have 2 literacy specialists, 1 guidance counselor.
Yeah. What's your role?
I teach 5th grade.
Okay.
She's one of the literacy specialists.
Okay.
It's just funny to see, like, your district is 970 miles, and you have half of the kids we have in a 16-mile radius.
Yep.
So it's just like, and like you guys can invest in your school, so I'm just wondering how.
Yeah.
you provide
So in full transparency, we employ all of our interventionists, and all of our intervention assistants are paid for with Title I. So it essentially means we have zero other money for Title I, but for us it's worth it. So our people are our greatest asset. I can build 95% group resources and all the intervention resources into my curriculum budget, but I can't build people into my budget. So we use all of our Title I money, and it's not even enough anymore because we've all kind of taken a hit in title money. But all 18 positions that we have are funded by Title I. So it's a lot, but again, our poverty rate means we get a lot of money typically. So that does help. I also think part of it is we've been very transparent with our board, who's been super supportive of the entire MTSS process. If it doesn't start with the board level, your administration, it's not going to get there. The board has to understand that to get these results, we have to invest in the human resources. And for us, we were spending, like when I looked at what was being spent prior to my role, there was a lot of money being spent on a lot of things that didn't get us results. So sometimes it's just shifting how you're spending money. I'd rather spend money on a person.
Well, we're still in the half-day K realm because I don't think they're willing to spend money on.
Ooh.
Our Title I money goes to
the 2 full-day K teachers. We do have 2 full-day K. So
Okay, and is that based on student need?
yes.
Yeah.
There's 10 elementary schools, 5 are Title I, 4 are Title I.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
they're the only ones that have full day K.
Wow.
Yeah. Partial.
And it's only partial.
Yeah. So the other thing too is definitely for the SGI pushing in piece. I mean, our interventionists stretch every single minute of their day. I'm pretty sure they probably don't take a prep. I don't know if they eat. Like, I don't know. They really do use every minute that's available with kids and every space. Like, you'll walk down the hallway at a given moment, somebody's out in the hallway with a kid, like, sitting on the floor. Like, every minute, every day.
We really do. We're running from one place to another, but it's good. We have a win time. You know, we have win time set up, and then when we're not doing win, we're pushing in to do small group, and then we're also pushing in to do a pre-teach evacuate. So those kids are getting, 3-4 doses are at-risk kids, and we're running around with little bags and carts and baskets and stuff. But it's good. It's good.
So the other thing, we are part of the Patent Systemic Support Grant this year. So that's been incredibly helpful for us to kind of have Patent alongside of us, looking at what we're doing, helping us refine. We have a lot of great things in place, but we know we always have miles to go. Currently, we're in the process of, since we've really had MTSS in place, Tier 2 has still kind of been mostly a pull-out service. We are shifting Tier 2 to targeted SGI by the classroom teacher, because that also provides you a little bit of additional capacity to use your intervention team for Tier 3, most intensive level of need. So shifting that Tier 2 also puts the ownership on the classroom teacher to know and understand that data and what students need to be successful in core. So a lot of times that's a pre-teach, like Lisa was saying, of the skills they're going to need to be able to access core the next day. So we are shifting that to classroom teachers, and although it feels like it's one more thing for them to do, I think there's a lot more intentionality behind what's going on then in SGI. And then doing a lot of Tier 3 problem solving, because no matter how good our system is, we will always have those kids who need that Tier 3 level of support. And we're also diving into the secondary world, but that's a whole different presentation. You want to talk about this? Oh!
I know, so we're going to do it quick.
So this is just basically a flow chart that we developed talking about, we do our universal screening 3 times a year using now Acadience this year. The students that are found to be Tier 1 students, they just continue on with the core curriculum. And then if they're found to be Tier needing tier 2 instruction, students that need that, we provide that. And then we do interventions for 6 to 8 weeks, get those data points, and then we meet and we discuss and determine how they're doing and then where we should go from there. We sort of wanted to lay it all out. And then those students that are found to be the highest risk, they get tier 3 instruction. So they get multiple doses of that with our most skilled instructors, our interventionists. And then we just have a process. If they're still found to be unsuccessful after multiple times of making changes, adjustments to their instruction and to what they need, then it might go to child study team and going further with that. But since we're really short on time, I think we should just... We have a handout here that
Yeah,
you can get at the
we
end.
made
It
some
has-
copies of some
this is
essential
part of
things
it,
from our
yeah, so
handbook
we'll make
if
sure
anybody
get,
wants
and
them.
we have our contact information at the end.
So we just wanted to share. We just wanted to share some of our data with you. I'll just go quickly how our triangles have changed over time, and so here's kindergarten. Kindergarten has been this is from Ames Web. Do you have a question?
No, we were looking at the differences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and we did, like she said, we switched to Acadians this year because Ames Web can be okay, but it also poses a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So this is historical Ames Web data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and here's our first grade. And hi, those of you, if you teach first grade's a hard year. It's a very, very hard year. They have to learn how to read in first grade, and there's just so many skills and things, and it is hard.
And in Ames Web, the only thing that goes into their composite is the
It's
ORF,
the oral reading fluency.
which is one of the reasons we switched.
Which is why we create our own composite, because we use
Yeah.
Ames Web as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you're doing, yeah.
And there's second grade.
So when you look at this, one thing that is encouraging to us, last year, I mean, we were a little bit disappointed that only 62% of our students are falling within tier 1, but I mean, it's better than where we have been. But if you go on to the next slide, so we had 62% at the end of the year that were in that
Go
green
next one.
category. But then, and we're still not sure how Ames Web and Acadians align, but when we look at those, actually, I wanted to look at first grade. I think it was 61%. But anyway, so 61% of first graders ended the year at proficient and advanced. And then when you look at our second grade beginning of the year data, it's 59% are in that green and blue. So we were sort of excited that we only had a 2% drop over the summer. So to us, what they come in with in the fall is what they really own. And so we feel that that's positive, and we're hoping to see good results.
Yeah, and I think the other piece that we knew we were missing is the level of attention on our advanced learners. So one of the things, did we not put that diamond in here? I don't know, go to the next one.
No, that diamond's one.
Okay, in one of the handouts, you'll see the other thing that we're adding this year is we kind of changed our triangle, MTSS triangle, to a diamond and added the enrichment pieces. So who are our tier 2 advanced learners, and here are our tier 3 advanced learners who are probably on the path towards a GIEP. But during win time, which is next, all of those kids are serviced, whether they are in need of the remedial tier 3 or the enrichment tier 2 or tier 3. Every kid is going somewhere for win with targeted instruction.
And we have a few slides on when, just basically, we've already talked about what it is, but as Megan just said, it's all hands on deck. So all the classroom teachers at that grade level, interventionists, intervention assistants, they all work with a student group, and it's, we could have someone doing the high level students. I mean, it's based on where the kids, what their needs are, what their instructional needs are. That time is given a priority and it's protected. So when we have assemblies, or we have, next week we have Mobile Ag Lab coming, I know when our STEM teacher developed that schedule, she asked me for the WIN schedule because she couldn't assign classrooms to go to that during WIN time, because we want to make sure that every single day they're getting that instruction.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, so this is how we figure out where they go. Of course, we use the benchmark assessment. We do a district sweep with everybody, helping the coaches, the interventionists. We do it 3 times a year, and we are using Acadians this year. And then we get together and we use diagnostics to figure out, pull out their strands, figure out where they are, and then that's how we make our groups. Now we at Rob, it's a large, high poverty population, and so like an example in first grade, we can pull out at least 18 teachers to break all these kids into these groups, and we are taking them we're ranking them from the lowest up to the highest, and that's then what we're doing is we're taking our interventionists, the most skilled people, and assigning these groups, and we're making those groups the smallest. We're trying to keep at least 3 kids in those small groups. And then at this time too, we're also using, we've really been able to add to our tier 3 resources that we use. So we have ECRI intensification, we have UFly, we have ERI, we have sound partners. We have a lot of really good instruction going on for these lowest of low kids.
And I think if you go to the next slide, there's some pictures of just some, I think you covered
just
that.
what I talked about, yeah.
I think you covered that if you go ahead. Just some resources. Again, what are we using in our tier 1? We kind of already covered this in that instructional matrix, but just some really good evidence-based programs that we know if we keep with and keep this year, we're really hyper-focused on fidelity and being consistent. Now that we've had these things in place, let's let them have some time to work and let's make sure we're doing them well. Let's address the areas we're not doing it well because we know that if we give it time, it will lead to results.
I know you said you're moving into middle school, and that's a whole other presentation, but we're actually middle school. I'm just wondering what materials you use for reading intervention.
I can send you the list if you want. I have, we've added some rewards. We've added some things like that. It's not as fully fleshed out as this is, but some really good resources that have definitely, we've seen results, especially with 5, 6, because that's a whole. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, did I hear you say that you assign the kids into the WIN groups? Mm-hmm. If that's the case, how do you exit them, or how frequently do you evaluate the groups to move them to different WIN?
Well, so the question was, how do you assign kids to tier 3?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, we follow the MTSS process, and what we do is we progress monitor them either weekly or bi-weekly, and then we keep them in those groups for about 6 weeks, and then we meet again as a team and reevaluate and have conversations on their data and where they are and what they're doing.
And I think a key piece there is if a kid's coming out of a tier 3 intervention, we need to make sure that SGI is super targeted for that kid then with that classroom teacher to make sure that they're keeping that progress and that they're not falling off. But that data is super crucial to make sure they keep it.
And the other thing is, as we're progress monitoring, we're constantly watching that data. Are they responding, and do we need to, let them sit a little bit longer and keep going? Do we need to
Do we change
when we
group
had those
size?
meetings?
What is
do we
it?
change?
Yeah.
Do we need to change the intensification?
Yeah.
We're keeping spreadsheets. I have a big spreadsheet on all the kids, and I plug in their progress monitoring just to make sure they're moving in and if they're hitting their targets and moving forward.
One teacher just told, she's like, I am up to my neck in data, and I'm like,
but I love data. I love it.
Tier 2 and 3 resources are up here to things that we've added over the course of the year. Again, most of those are shifting to tier 3 at this point because we're shifting that tier 2 to SGI with the classroom teacher. Our contact information is up here. We don't have really, I don't think, any time for questions, but we'll stick around if anybody has any questions. Thank you so much. Yeah.